Before you scroll away, let me tell you something disturbing. There is a recording locked inside an evidence archive in northern China. Investigators who listened to it described the same thing, not screaming, not crying, but calm voices calmly explaining how their own faces were rotting while they were still alive. And what makes this worse is that the people on that recording were not imagining it. They were watching it happen in real time. This story begins in 2012, when a small private environmental research group called the Lanhai Field Institute received permission to survey an abandoned mining region near the border of Yunnan province. On paper, the area was unremarkable. Old tunnels, collapsed structures, and a few forgotten villages that had been evacuated decades earlier due to what officials called geological instability. But locals had a very different explanation. They said the land was sick, not poisoned, not cursed, sick. For years, hikers avoided it. Hunters refused to go near it. Even people who had lived nearby their whole lives would lower their voices when talking about the valley. They had a name for one specific area inside that region. Roughly translated, it meant the place where faces are lost. The Lanhai team didn't believe in stories like that. To them, this was just another field assignment. The team consisted of 8 people, 2 geologists, 1 biologist, 1 medical researcher, 1 documentarian, and 3 field assistants. They were led by Dr. Wei Jiang, a respected environmental toxicologist who had spent most of his career studying the long-term effects of industrial pollution. Their goal was simple: go in, collect soil samples, take water readings, document plant life, and leave. The first 2 days went exactly as planned. They set up a base camp near the edge of the valley and began working their way inward. The landscape, however, felt wrong. The trees were tall but strangely bare near the bottom, as if something had stripped the bark away years ago. The ground felt soft in places, almost spongy, like it had been burned and then slowly grown over again. There was also a smell, not strong, not overwhelming, but always there, like old metal mixed with something faintly sweet. On the 3rd day, they reached the remains of what had once been a village. Stone foundations, broken pottery, rusted tools, no signs of fire, no signs of flooding, just empty, as if everyone had stood up and left at the same time. The documentarian Lin Mei started filming immediately. Later, she would say that even through the camera, the place felt quiet in a way that pressed against your ears. That night, one of the assistants, a young man named Chang, complained of a headache. No one thought much of it. They gave him water and told him to rest. By morning, he said his face felt tight, like his skin was too small for his skull. The medical researcher, Dr. Han, examined him and found nothing wrong. No rash, no swelling, no discoloration. Chiang even joked about it, saying it felt like he had slept in the sun too long. They continued their work, but by midday, 2 more people started complaining of the same sensation: tight skin, tingling, and a strange numbness around the mouth and cheeks. Dr. Zhang decided it was time to use the respirators they had brought as a precaution. The masks helped a little. The symptoms didn't get worse, but they didn't go away either. That evening, Lin Mei was reviewing the footage she had filmed when she noticed something strange. In one of the clips, Chang's face looked slightly different. Not enough to be obvious at first glance, but when she compared it to footage from 2 days earlier, his skin tone looked uneven, like faint shadows were forming under the surface. She assumed it was just lighting and didn't mention it to anyone. That night, almost no one slept. Several of them reported vivid dreams where they looked into mirrors and didn't recognize their own faces. Dreams where their skin felt loose or heavy or wrong. Around 3 in the morning, one of the geologists, a man named Ren, woke the camp by screaming. When they rushed to his tent, they found him sitting upright, clawing at his own cheeks, repeating the same words again and again. He kept saying that something was moving under his skin. Dr. Han tried to calm him down and shined a flashlight on his face. That's when everyone went quiet. There were faint lines under Ren's skin, not wrinkles and not veins, just thin lines, like something had been drawn beneath the surface of his face. They weren't red or bruised, they were just there. Ren eventually stopped struggling, but he refused to look at anyone. He just sat there shaking, whispering that his face didn't feel like it belonged to him anymore. The next morning, Dr. Zheng decided to cut the expedition short. The plan was to move back toward the base camp near the valley's edge and reassess the situation. Before they left, Lin Mei filmed short close-up interviews with the 3 people who were experiencing symptoms: Chiang, Ren, and another assistant named Li. At the time, they just looked tired and stressed, maybe a little pale. No one realized that this footage would soon become something far more disturbing. As they began hiking back, the symptoms started getting worse. Li complained that his vision was blurry. Chang said his mouth felt numb, like he had been to the dentist. Ren barely spoke at all. About 2 hours into the hike, Chang suddenly stopped walking. He stood there very still and asked if his face looked wrong. Dr. Han told him no, but Lin Mei raised her camera anyway. When she zoomed in, she saw it. The skin around Chang's cheeks and jaw looked uneven, like wax that had been left too close to heat. It wasn't melting or dripping, it just didn't hold its shape properly anymore. Chang reached up and touched his face, then pulled his hand back like he had touched something hot. He said it felt soft, and that it wasn't supposed to feel soft. Ren finally spoke and said that it was happening to all of them. They tried to move faster, but Li stumbled. When they helped him up, Lin Mei's camera caught something that would later be studied frame by frame. For just a second, the skin near Li's eye shifted, not like a muscle twitch, but like something underneath had given way. Li started crying, not because of pain, but because he said he could feel his face changing and he couldn't stop it. By the time they reached the base camp, everyone was in a panic. Dr. Zhang called for emergency extraction and tried to explain the situation over the satellite phone. The nearest pickup point was still hours away. While they waited, Ren asked for a mirror. No one wanted to give him one, but he found a small cracked mirror in one of the equipment cases. When he looked at himself, he screamed, dropped the mirror, and covered his face, saying it wasn't his face anymore. When Lin Mei picked up the mirror, she understood why. Ren's features looked wrong. The symmetry was off. His cheekbones looked lower, and his mouth didn't sit the same way on his face. It looked like someone had taken his face and slowly started to reshape it. Lin Mei kept filming as Dr. Han tried to examine them again and as Dr. Zhang argued with emergency services. The 3 affected team members sat together, afraid to touch their own faces. Slowly, they began describing what they were feeling, not pain and not burning, but slipping and loosening, like their skin was no longer attached to what was underneath. Chang said it felt like his face was falling. Li said he could feel it changing when he breathed. Ren looked at the camera and said he thought they were watching themselves disappear. When the camera zoomed in, the changes were impossible to ignore. Their faces weren't just shifting. They were breaking down from the inside, losing structure and shape in a way that made no sense. Lin Mei kept filming even when Dr. Zhang told her to stop, because some part of her knew that whatever was happening, this might be the only record of it. That's when the sound started. A faint clicking noise when Li moved his jaw. A wet, shifting sound under the skin. Ren said it was getting faster. Chang started laughing quietly and said he couldn't feel his cheeks anymore. When Dr. Han touched his face, his fingers sank in just slightly, enough to make him pull his hand back in shock. Li started saying his face felt hollow, like there was space where there shouldn't be space. Ren said they weren't changing, they were coming apart. And as the team waited desperately for help to arrive, Lin Mei's camera kept recording something no one there would ever forget. They were watching their faces rot in real time. The extraction team was still hours away, and everyone at the camp could feel that time was slipping through their fingers. Chiang sat on the ground with his hands pressed against his face. Not in pain, but like he was trying to hold something in place. Lee was breathing fast, saying that the air felt wrong, like his face was closing in on itself. Ren stood a few steps away from everyone else, staring at the dirt, afraid to look up. Dr. Han kept trying to stay calm, repeating that shock and stress could make symptoms feel worse, that they just needed to keep everyone still and wait for help. But even he didn't believe his own words anymore. The changes were too visible now. Chiang's cheeks looked lower than they had an hour ago. Lee's nose seemed slightly bent to one side. Ren's mouth didn't line up with the rest of his face anymore. It wasn't dramatic, but it was unmistakable. Something was slowly, quietly rearranging them. Lin May's camera kept recording. Later, when specialists reviewed the footage frame by frame, they noticed details no one had seen in the moment. The skin on Chiang's face wasn't just sagging, it was moving almost imperceptibly, like wet clay settling under its own weight. Lee kept swallowing and saying he could hear something inside his head, like a faint cracking sound. Ren finally looked up and said that it felt like his face was no longer connected to him, like it was something he was wearing instead of something he was. The first real break happened near the corner of Chiang's mouth. At first it looked like a shadow, then like a thin, dark line. Dr. Han leaned closer, trying to see what it was, and that was when the line widened just slightly. Chiang started screaming and grabbed his own face, not pulling at it, but trying to keep it from moving. He kept saying that it was coming off and that he couldn't hold it anymore. Lee started crying and said his nose felt blocked even though he could still breathe. He said it felt like there was empty space inside his face. When Dr. Han shined a light at him, he saw something that made him step back. The structure under Lee's skin looked wrong, like it had started to collapse inward. There was no blood and no open wound, just a subtle sinking where something solid should have been. Ren said they shouldn't touch their faces anymore because every time they did, it felt like things shifted faster. He said it wasn't an infection and it wasn't a reaction. He said it felt like whatever was holding their faces together was simply failing. Chiang collapsed to his knees, still fully conscious, still aware, still begging them to help him hold his face in place. Lin May kept filming even though her hands were shaking. She later said that in that moment, it felt less like watching people get sick and more like watching something fundamental about the human body come undone. Chiang's hands slipped, and when they did, his face changed shape again, just a little, but enough that everyone could see it. Once it started, it didn't reverse. It only continued. Lee began to panic, saying he could feel air moving under his skin when he breathed. He kept pressing his hands to his cheeks, then pulling them away like he was afraid of what he might feel. Ren stood very still and said that they weren't dying the way people usually die. He said they were being taken apart piece by piece, starting with their faces. Dr. Zhang was still arguing on the satellite phone, trying to get the extraction team to hurry, trying to explain that this wasn't a normal medical emergency. His voice kept breaking because he didn't have the words to describe what he was seeing. How do you explain that 3 people are slowly losing the structure of their own faces, without any wounds, without any blood, without any visible cause? The sounds got worse. That faint clicking noise when Lee moved his jaw became more frequent. Chiang made a wet, shifting sound every time he tried to speak. Ren said he could hear something inside his head, like tiny pieces moving where they shouldn't be moving. None of them said it hurt. They said it felt wrong. They said it felt like their faces were no longer theirs. At one point, Chiang looked directly into Lin May's camera and asked her to keep filming no matter what happened. He said that if they didn't survive, someone needed to see what this place did to them. A few minutes later, he stopped trying to speak because his mouth no longer moved the way he expected it to. Lee suddenly gagged and leaned forward, retching, even though there was nothing in his stomach. When he lifted his head again, his face looked different. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way you could easily describe, but in a way that made everyone instinctively step back. His features didn't seem to line up anymore, like they had shifted slightly out of place. Ren said very quietly that he could feel parts of his face that no longer had any weight. He said it felt like wearing a mask that was slowly slipping off, except the mask was him. He said he was afraid to touch his own skin because he didn't know what would happen if he did. The extraction team was still at least 40 minutes away. They didn't have 40 minutes. Chung tried to stand up and immediately fell back down. Dr. Han and Dr. Zhang tried to help him, but Chung pushed their hands away, begging them not to touch his face. He said every time someone touched him, things felt looser, like whatever was holding him together was giving up. Lin Mei's camera captured everything: the shaking hands, the broken voices, the way the three of them kept glancing at each other's faces and then looking away in fear. It captured the moment when Li said he couldn't feel his nose anymore. It captured the moment when Ren said he could feel his mouth, but didn't he think it was in the right place anymore. And then, slowly, one by one, they stopped trying to describe what they were feeling. Not because things got better, but because they didn't know how to explain what was happening anymore. Zhang was the first to go silent. He didn't pass out. He didn't scream. He just stopped reacting. His hands fell away from his face and he sat there, breathing, staring at nothing. Lin Mei later said that in that moment it felt like he was still there, but also already gone. Li followed not long after. He lay down on his side, curled up, saying he was tired. He said he just wanted to sleep for a minute. Dr. Han tried to keep him awake, but Li's eyes kept closing. When he finally stopped speaking, there was no sudden moment, no dramatic last breath. He was just quiet. Ren was the last one still sitting up. He looked at Dr. Zhang and said that whatever was happening to them wasn't an accident. He said the place was doing this. He said the valley was taking them apart. Then he looked at Lin Mei's camera and said that if anyone ever watched this, they should never come here. The recording ends not because Lin Mei stopped filming, but because the battery died. When the extraction team finally arrived, the camp was silent. Dr. Zhang, Dr. Han, Lin Mei, and the rest of the team were sitting together, exhausted and in shock. The three who had been changing were gone, not wandered off, not hiding, gone. There were no bodies, no blood, no signs of a struggle, just their equipment, their clothes, and 3 empty spaces where people had been. The official report later said that the 3 men were lost in difficult terrain during a medical emergency. The footage was classified and locked away. The area was closed to the public, and soon after, the valley disappeared from all public maps. But a few people have seen the recording, and every single one of them says the same thing. The most disturbing part isn't watching their faces change. It's hearing their voices while it's happening, hearing how aware they are, hearing how calmly they describe themselves coming apart. Dr. Zhang resigned 6 months later and never returned to field work. Lin Mei never released another documentary. Dr. Han refused to speak about the incident again. The valley is still there, but locals continue to avoid it. They still call it the place where faces are lost. So if you ever hear about a place where people don't come back the same way they went in, maybe don't be curious, maybe don't be brave, because some places don't kill you, they don't even hurt you, they just slowly take you apart while you're still alive. If you want more stories of the unexplained disappearances and mysteries that chill the mind, make sure to like this video, leave a comment with the story that disturbed you the most, and subscribe to Mystery Spectrum US. Every day we dive into the unknown, so don't miss the next one. And remember, sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's hiding in the dark, it's what's quietly changing right in front of you.